They speak, but no one listens. They post, but no one cares. They try to persuade, but their words fall like leaves in a storm beautiful. Maybe, but weightless. Because most people have never learned the first secret of influence. You cannot move another soul until you have touched your own. Most people fail to influence because they are busy performing, not connecting. They mistake volume for conviction. They believe that talking louder will make them seem wiser. But true influence is not noise. It is presence. It is the quiet power in your eyes when you've mastered your own storms. It is the silence between your words that makes people lean in. It is the calm in your spirit that makes others want to follow you, not because they have to, but because they feel safer when they do. You do not influence people by winning arguments. You influence them by winning hearts. And hearts do not respond to manipulation. They respond to sincerity. They respond to the feeling that you see them, hear them, understand them, not because you're trying to win something, but because you care enough not to try. Dale Carnegie once said, "Our thoughts make us what we are." So ask yourself, what are you thinking about when you speak to others? Are you thinking of their fears, their hopes, their burdens? Or are you thinking only of your need to be seen? Because the person who influences is the one who disappears into service, who forgets themselves long enough to remember what it means to matter to another human being. You do not gain influence by proving how important you are. You gain it by proving how important they are. Why do most people fail to influence others? Because they try to impress. But influence is not born in the desire to be admired. It is born in the desire to understand. You cannot influence someone whose heart you have not touched. And you cannot touch a heart while guarding your own. People don't follow those who shout the loudest. They follow those who feel the deepest. Most people have been taught to speak to the mind. But the mind is a skeptic. It questions. It resists. It defends. The heart, though it knows. And once the heart knows, the mind will find a way to justify the truth it already feels. So speak to the heart, and the mind will follow. Never forget, people are not looking for perfect. They are looking for real pain, real presence, real love. That is influence. Not polish, not titles, not authority. You don't need a platform. You need a pulse. You don't need charisma. You need character. You don't need tricks. You need truth. And the truth is this: if your words don't cost you something, they will never buy you trust. Influence is not in what you say. It's in who you are when you say it. That is why people will walk away from a millionaire and sit for hours with a gardener who knows how to listen. Because influence is not status, it's energy. And energy never lies. It's why we remember the strangers who were kind to us in a moment of weakness and forget the experts who never once made us feel human. It's why a single sentence from a loving friend can shift your whole world, while an entire lecture from a brilliant mind can leave you cold. Because influence is not about knowing more. It's about feeling more. If you want others to believe in you, let them see your humanity. People trust you more when they know you're real, not perfect. Why do most people fail to influence others? Because they try to perform their message instead of becoming it. But no one believes a message that hasn't been lived. If you want to be remembered, stop trying to be impressive. Start trying to be true. No one ever says, "They changed my life because they knew so much." They say, "They changed my life because they understood me when no one else did." So become that person, not loud, not forceful, but clear, unshakable, and full of care. Speak less, listen more. Not just with your ears, but with your soul. Watch how people open. Watch how walls dissolve. Watch how resistance crumbles, not because you pushed, but because you saw. That is the divine secret of influence. Most people fail because they think influence is about power, but the real ones know it's about presence. Influence begins where ego ends. You cannot serve and seek applause at the same time. The heart can feel when you're showing up to be seen and when you're showing up to see it. People crave to be understood more than they crave to be right. And most people never influence because they don't understand this simple truth. When you make someone feel seen, you give them the courage to be who they really are. That is the highest influence of all, not to change someone, but to awaken them. Most people try to impress the room, but the ones who change the room are the ones who enter it with empathy instead of ego. If your goal is to dominate, you will always trigger resistance. But if your goal is to understand, you will create space for growth. People do not change when they are judged. They change when they are accepted. Influence is not controlled. It is trust. And trust can only exist where judgment has died. You must decide what kind of presence you want to carry. Do you walk into a room with pressure, or do you walk in with peace? Do you try to convert others into your vision, or do you hold space for them to discover their own? People don't need more teachers. They need mirrors. They need someone who reflects back the best of who they are, even when they've forgotten it. The secret to influence is not to fix people. It's to love them enough that they fix themselves. But love is not weakness. Love is the strongest force in the world because it doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand. Quiet, consistent, true. You cannot give to others what you haven't found within yourself. You cannot bring peace if you are at war inside. You cannot offer clarity if your motives are cloudy. That's why the real work is not in convincing others. It's in cleansing yourself. Influence is the byproduct of inner purity. The clearer your intention, the stronger your energy. And people feel energy long before they understand words. That's why a single look of compassion can transform someone's day more than an hour-long speech. That's why a silent presence beside someone's pain can heal more than 1,000 solutions. If you want to influence others, stop asking, "How can I persuade them?" and start asking, "How can I love them without needing to change them?" Because people do not change when you press harder. They change when you care deeper. But that care must be real. It cannot be forced. It cannot be faked. People can smell manipulation in your tone. They can feel dishonesty in your smile. They know when you're pretending, and they close their hearts the moment they sense it. Influence doesn't come from strategy. It comes from sincerity, not from perfection, from presence, not from knowing all the answers, from being willing to sit with the questions. You don't need to perform. Just listen, care, and be present. The more interested you are in others, the more influence you have. Become someone whose very presence says, "You matter." Because when someone feels they matter, they begin to change on their own. And that is the art of influence, not in controlling the outcome, but in becoming the environment where transformation can begin. Most people fail to influence because they're obsessed with being right. But no one is transformed by being proven wrong. They are transformed by being reminded they are loved, even in their imperfection. Influence is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the safest, the most grounded, the most real. It's not about knowing more than others. It's about knowing yourself so well that your peace becomes contagious, that your clarity becomes magnetic, that your stillness becomes power, that your honesty becomes healing. The world does not need more noise. It needs more truth. And truth, when spoken from a soul that has lived it, has the power to reshape destinies. If you want to influence, start here. Heal what's broken in you. Forgive what's bitter in you. Honor what's sacred in you. And then let who you are speak louder than anything you say. That is the kind of influence no one can fake. That is the kind of influence that changes lives. Trying to sound smart rarely works. People remember you when you make them feel important, not when you try to impress them. And the heart is the gatekeeper of every decision that truly matters. Logic matters, but people respond more to what feels honest and personal. Speak to what they care about, as if they've always known it, but were too afraid to say it out loud. That's why real influence sounds like remembrance. It doesn't feel foreign, it feels like coming home, like someone finally put into words what your soul was whispering all along. That is what we crave. Not to be told what to do, but to be reminded of who we are. Influence fails when it becomes about control. It thrives when it becomes about liberation. Most people are trapped inside cages of their own self-doubt, and no matter how loudly you speak, they won't hear you until they feel safe to open the door. You can't kick down someone's inner prison. You can only offer your presence as proof that the world outside is worth stepping into. Influence is the invitation, not the force. It is the whisper, not the demand. It is the open hand, not the clenched fist. But in a world that worships domination, gentleness is often mistaken for weakness. Don't let that fool you. The gentlest souls carry the fiercest strength. The ones who stay kind in a world that spits out cruelty are the ones whose influence will outlast the noise, because kindness cannot be undone. It plants seeds in people's memory that blossom years later, long after your words have been forgotten. That's how influence works. Not instantly, not loudly, but eternally. It lingers in the soul. It reshapes without resistance. It pierces without pain. It leaves people saying, I don't know what it was, but something about them changed me. And that something is your authenticity. Influence is what happens when you stop trying to impress and start trying to be honest. When you stop seeking attention and start offering presence. When you stop rehearsing your lines and start listening for their truth. Most people think influence is about speaking well, but the truth is, it's about listening deeply. So deeply that the other person feels like they finally matter. So deeply that their armor cracks just enough to let the light in. And that light, that's the beginning of transformation. People don't change when they're cornered. They change when they feel safe enough to grow. Your job is not to force them open. Your job is to be so rooted in your own peace that they begin to open on their own. That's the quiet miracle of influence. You do not change people. You become the space where they choose to change. That's why you must cultivate stillness. Stillness in your motives. Stillness in your energy. Stillness in your heart. Because frantic hearts create fear, but calm hearts create trust. And trust is the bridge between knowing and becoming. Most people fail to influence because they try to lead with the mind, but forget that the soul only follows love. You must lead with lovino, the soft, passive kind, but the fierce, clear, grounded love that sees people as they are and still chooses to stay. That's rare, that's real, and that's what transforms lives. The greatest influencers of all time weren't the loudest, they were the clearest. They didn't force belief, they modeled conviction. They didn't manipulate, they inspired. And they inspired, not because they were perfect, but because they were true. Be true. Live in a way that backs up your words. People believe actions more than speeches. That people feel more honest just by being near you. That they remember their own integrity because of your example. That they begin to tell themselves the truth they've been running from. Influence is not about standing above. It's about standing beside. It's about walking into someone's story without judgment and walking out with their trust. And that trust, that's the most sacred thing a human can give. Don't take it lightly. Don't waste it proving yourself. Use it to lift them higher. Use it to remind them who they are. Use it to plant something eternal. Because in the end, influence is not about changing minds. It's about awakening souls. The soul cannot be led by someone who hasn't led themselves through darkness. Influence doesn't come from what you know. It comes from what you've survived. People listen to those who've walked through fire and still carry water. Because when you've suffered and stayed soft, when you've been betrayed and stayed sincere, when you've failed and still showed up with open hands, people feel that. They trust it. They recognize it as real. Most fail to influence because they pretend to be untouchable. But no one follows a statue. They follow a story that bleeds, a story that stumbles, a story that owns its cracks and still stands in the light, because it's in those cracks that your humanity is revealed, and humanity is the only language every heart speaks. Don't be afraid to show yours. The moments that broke you didn't disqualify you. They prepared you. They gave your words weight. They gave your presence depth. They gave your silence meaning. People can hear your wounds even when you speak with confidence. They can feel your scars even when you wear a smile. And that's not a weakness. That's your superpower. That's what makes you unforgettable. Not the polish, not the perfection, but the presence of someone who's walked through hell and still believes in heaven. You cannot fake that. You cannot imitate that. You can only earn that. Through tears, through heartbreak, through standing back up when everything inside you wanted to stay down. And that's why your story matters. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real. And realness influences in ways logic never could. People don't change because you say the right things. They change because you are the right thing at the right time. A living, breathing reminder that truth still exists, that love can still be trusted, that strength and softness can live in the same voice. Most people chase influence like a crown, but the real crown is invisible. It's the trust others give you when they sense your sincerity. It's the silence they share with you when words would betray their pain. It's the tears they let fall in your presence because you feel safe, not sharp. You don't earn that with charm. You earn that with character. You earn that by showing up every day as someone whose values don't bend with the wind, as someone who doesn't gossip when it's easy, as someone who doesn't betray when no one's looking, as someone who lives so rooted in truth that even your silence has integrity. Influence isn't about being loud. It's about being true in a world that rewards pretending. Most people wear masks to impress, but the ones who take theirs off quietly, without announcement, those are the ones who leave a mark. Vulnerability is not a tactic. It's not something you use. It's something you are. And when it's genuine, it disarms people. It levels the field. It says, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm just here to stand with you. That is the voice people crave in their darkest moments. Not the voice that tells them what to do, but the voice that says, me too. Influence doesn't shout from the top of a mountain. It kneels in the dirt beside the weary. It doesn't hand out answers. It holds space for the questions. It doesn't pretend to have it all together. It says, let's find the way together. Most people fail to influence because they're too busy building platforms instead of building people. But the truth is, your impact will never be measured by your followers. It will be measured by the hearts you helped lift off the floor, the souls you reminded they were worthy, the quiet moments you gave someone their hope back. And the crazy thing is, you may never even know the full extent of your influence. Because real influence is silent, invisible, eternal. It ripples far beyond what the eye can see. So do not underestimate a kind word. Do not downplay a gentle presence. Do not forget the power of your truth spoken in love. You are always planting seeds. And one day long after you've forgotten the conversation, someone will stand tall because of the shelter your presence gave them when their world was falling apart. Most people want to change the world, but they haven't yet mastered changing the temperature of a single conversation. They dream of impact, but forget that impact begins in the small moments, in how you speak when you're tired, in how you respond when you're disappointed, in how you hold someone's dignity even when you disagree. Influence is not grand gestures. It is the quiet courage of consistency, the strength to be kind when it's not convenient, the decision to remain rooted in values when everyone else sways in the wind of approval. And this is where most people fail. They want the spotlight, but not the shadow work. They want to be heard, but not to heal. But your influence is only as deep as your integrity. And integrity is forged in solitude when no one is watching, and you choose truth anyway. The people who truly influence us are not always the loudest. They are often the ones who loved us when we were unlovable, who stood beside us when we were ashamed, who believed in our light even when we were drowning in our own darkness. Influence is not taught, it is embodied. And what you embody speaks louder than your words ever could. If your energy says, "I see you," people will listen even if you never speak. But if your energy screams, "See me," they will turn away, no matter how wise your message is. That's why the hardest lesson of influence is learning to stop needing validation. Because the moment you need to be seen is the moment your presence stops being a gift and starts being a transaction. People are drawn to you when you're confident and generous, not when you're trying to get something from them. Focus on giving, not gaining. That fullness only comes from inner peace. And peace is not passive, it is the fiercest power on earth. It is the mountain unmoved by the storm. It is the voice that whispers truth when the world demands lies. It is the presence that calms a room without a single word. And peace, once cultivated, becomes a force field, a gravitational pull. The kind of energy people seek when they're lost. The kind of presence that doesn't demand to be followed, but is followed anyway. Most people fail to influence because they rush to speak when they should be listening. They mistake urgency for importance. But hearts don't open to pressure. They open to patience. They open to presence. They open when they feel safe and not when they feel chased. You want to change someone's life. Make them feel safe to be exactly who they are in front of you. No masks, no performance, just truth. Because that moment, that breath of relief, when someone feels they don't have to hide, that's the moment their healing begins. And you were the catalyst, not because you had the right answer, but because you gave them space. That's what people remember. Not what you said, not what you gave, but how they felt when they were around you. Did they feel judged or understood? Did they feel pressured or empowered? Did they feel like a project or like a person? Most people fail to influence because they try to fix what they do not understand. But you cannot fix what you do not honor, and you cannot honor what you have not taken time to see. So stop trying to fix people. See them, really see them. Let your presence say, "You are not broken, you are becoming." Let your words say, "You are not behind, you are unfolding." Let your eyes say, "You are not too much, you are magnificent." That is how you shift lives. Not with force, but with faith. Faith in their process. Faith in their timing. Faith in the seed that's already planted inside of them. Don't rush people to change. Encourage them. Support them. Give them time and space to grow. That's the sacred role of someone who leads from the heart. And to lead from the heart, you must first make peace with your own. People often speak from frustration instead of understanding. When you share from experience, not emotion, people are more likely to listen. Wounds shout. Wisdom whispers. Wounds seek to be heard. Wisdom seeks to hear. And you must ask yourself, in every moment of tension, am I leading from the part of me that needs or the part of me that knows? Because what you lead from is what you spread. And the world has enough people spreading noise. Be the one who spreads clarity. Be the one who walks into a room and brings grounding. Be the one whose silence feels like a sanctuary. That is influence. That is power. That is the kind of presence people will follow even when they don't understand why. Because the world is starving for something real. People scroll for hours, yet feel more alone than ever. They're drowning in information, but starving for meaning. And here's the truth. You don't need to raise your voice to stand out. You just need to be clear about who you are and what you stand for. In a world full of noise, people remember those who are calm, honest, and consistent. You don't need a platform to be respected. What matters is your character, how you treat people when no one's watching. Clarity of heart, clarity of purpose, clarity of character. And most people fail to influence because they lack this inner clarity. They are chasing impressions instead of embodying intention. But intention is everything. You can say the same words with a different intention and change someone's life or crush it. What you mean is louder than what you say. What you carry is more powerful than what you perform. That's why your inner world matters. That's why self-awareness is not optional. It is the foundation. Because when you don't know who you are, you become a mirror for everyone else's approval. And a soul that lives on reflection can never cast its own light. Influence begins when you no longer need to be accepted to feel secure. When you walk into a room, not wondering if they'll like you, but wondering how you can serve them. That shift subtle, invisibly is the difference between manipulation and transformation. It's the energy shift that people feel instantly. They won't always be able to explain it, but they'll feel more open, more safe, more drawn to you. Why? Because the human soul recognizes authenticity like flowers recognize the sun. Most people walk around with masks, and so they attract masks in return. But when you show up raw, honest, and deeply grounded, you give other people permission to breathe. And that permission, that's what becomes unforgettable. That's the moment when trust is born. And trust is sacred currency. Do not spend it on performance, spend it on presence. Most people fail to influence because they try to be extraordinary. But extraordinary isn't loud, it's rare. And rarity doesn't need to announce itself. A diamond doesn't shout. It simply is. Your job is not to convince others of your worth. Your job is to embody it so fully that your silence speaks for you. You don't influence by being the loudest. You influence by being calm, confident, and genuinely caring. It is the unshakable frequency of a person who has nothing to prove, only something to give. When your life becomes about giving not out of emptiness, but from overflow, your very existence becomes influence. Not what you post, not what you say, but how you live, how you look someone in the eye, how you choose patience when anger would be easier, how you honor someone's pain without trying to fix it, how you make people feel when they walk away from you. That's what they remember. Not the facts, not the brilliance, but the feeling, the space, the soul. That is what stays with them. That is what shapes them. That is what awakens them. So the question is not, how can I influence? The question is, what am I radiating? Because you are always influencing something. The only question is what? Are you radiating desperation or wholeness? Fear or faith? Need or peace? Are you creating pressure or creating freedom? Are you adding noise or creating stillness? Every room you walk into shifts in your presence. The air gets thicker or lighter. People feel more seen or more invisible. They open up or they shut down, all because of the invisible energy you bring. This is the power no one teaches, the silent force no one applauds. But it is the only real influence that exists, and it is born from depth, from self-honesty, from doing the work no one sees, from choosing values over validation, from waking up every day and saying, "Let my life be my voice." That is what moves people. That is what pierces the soul. That is what breaks down walls without raising your voice. You don't need permission to be this kind of person. You don't need applause. You just need alignment. And alignment is quiet. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It just is. Like the ocean, like the stars, like the truth. And when you become aligned, people may not understand you, but they will feel you. They may not always agree, but they will respect you, because you carry what cannot be faked. And that is what they've been waiting for. Not a savior, not a star, but a human who is whole, who is true, who is safe, who reminds them of what they, too, can become. Influence is not about spotlight. It's about substance. It's not about gathering crowds. It's about touching souls. And when you understand this, your whole posture changes. You no longer chase popularity. You protect presence. You no longer beg to be noticed. You walk in your own knowing. You no longer strategize to win people. You serve them from a full cup. Because people don't follow those who shout, they follow those who care. When you take time to understand someone, when you respond with kindness instead of criticism, they remember that. You don't have to fix anyone. Just be the kind of person they feel safe talking to. Ask, "How are you really doing?" And mean it. That kind of simple, genuine interest is rare, and that's what makes it powerful. People remember how you made them feel, not how impressive you sounded. And before you can help others, you need to be honest with yourself. If you're too worried about what others think, you'll never truly connect with them. People trust those who are real. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be genuine. When you're okay with who you are, you naturally give others permission to be themselves too. And that's what creates real influence. Influence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration, from holding your light and your shadow in the same breath, from standing before others with your humanity fully exposed and saying, "Even so, I am here. Even so, I am enough." That kind of presence liberates people. It unties their inner knots. It reminds them they are more than their image. And that remembrance, that moment of being seen without performances, where transformation begins, you can give someone a strategy and they'll doubt themselves. But give them the feeling that they are worthy and they will find their own strength. That is the sacred alchemy of influence. It's not information. It's embodiment. It's not projection. It's reflection. The truth is, we don't change people. We remind them of what they've forgotten. We hold a mirror to the greatness already within them. And that mirror is your presence, your stillness, your grounded love. Most people fail to influence because they're trying to impress minds rather than impact hearts. But the heart cannot be moved by cleverness. It only responds to truth. Truth is quiet. Truth is simple. Truth is what remains when all the pretending burns away. And when you speak from that place, people stop scrolling. People stop pretending. People stop running. They sit, they listen, they open. And in that opening, the seed is planted. You may never see the bloom, but influence is not measured by applause. It is measured by legacy, by the invisible shifts you cause in others that ripple long after you're gone. By the way, someone breathes easier because of a word you whispered. By the way, someone stood up taller because of the way you looked at them. That is your power. That is your impact. But it can only be accessed through sincerity, and sincerity requires courage. It requires the willingness to stand without armor, the courage to not defend, to not convince, to not outperform, but to be fully, freely, fearlessly. When you embody that kind of truth, people feel safe to become themselves in your presence. And when someone feels safe to be themselves around you, they will never forget you. That is how hearts are moved. That is how minds are changed. That is how lives are transformed, not by force, but by resonance, not by control, but by compassion, not by instruction, but by invitation. You invite people into deeper truth when you yourself are living there. You invite people into peace when you carry it in your bones. You invite people into courage when you walk it, not just talk it. That is leadership. That is influence. That is the real work, not performance, but presence. Not being impressive, but being real. Not having the answers, but holding space for the questions. You don't need more words. You need more weight behind your words. And that weight doesn't come from study, it comes from soul. It comes from scars, from silence, from nights you held yourself together without witnesses, from mornings you rose anyway. That's what people feel. That's what makes your message magnetic. It's not the clarity of your language. It's the clarity of your life. So stop editing your soul to fit into rooms that can't hold your truth. Stop shrinking to be liked. Stop performing to be praised. Just show up fully, freely, as you are. Speak from your center. Live from your values. Walk in your alignment. And let that be the sermon. Let that be the influence. Let that be the revolution. Because the world has had enough noise. It is starving for truth, for depth, for the quiet fire of a soul that knows who it is. Be that fire. So if you leave with nothing else, leave with this. Your influence is not something you chase at, is something you become, not by force, not by pretense, but by standing rooted in truth when the world spins in illusion. Influence is not about how many follow you. It's about how many are freed by you. How many rise taller because you believed in them. How many felt peace in your presence without understanding why. That is what lasts. That is what echoes. That is what ripples far beyond the metrics, the followers, the applause. And when the noise fades and the crowds move on, and all that remains is who you are when no one's watching, that is the voice the world needed all along. You, not your performance, not your perfection, but your presence, your compassion, your integrity. That's the legacy. That's the revolution. And if you want to influence the world, begin by influencing one person yourself. Speak kindly to your own mind. Forgive your own past. Lead your own heart. Because once you've learned to lead yourself with honesty, with courage, with grace, then, and only then, will your voice carry the weight to lead others. And not just lead, but lift. And not just lift, but awaken. The world does not need another influencer. It needs more truth, more clarity, more love dressed as character, more strength disguised as humility. More of the kind of power that doesn't boast but builds. The kind that walks in silence, yet reshapes everything in its path. Be that power. Live in a way that speaks louder than words. You don't need to impress people to influence them. Just show them they matter. In the end, people won't remember your title. They'll remember how you made them feel.